There we go. Good. Well, first I'm going to tell you something a bit ironic. Last week I talked about expectations, and expectations are what? Disappointments. Expectations not lead to, but expectations are disappointments. Expectations are disappointments. And it was kind of funny because, or ironic, I say funny is totally the inappropriate word, because right after I finished, someone who was here came up to me and said, you know, I had really expected you were going to talk about the attacks in Paris. And she was disappointed. And this morning, I'm going to talk about the talks in Paris, and for various very important reasons, she's not here. But I know that, so I'm not disappointed. She can always watch it on camera. We all know what's going on in the world. We all know a lot of people are talking about it. I guess I wanted my opportunity to just share my experience of it. And that's really all it is. Really, this is about the third major act of terrorism in the last month. You've got to take into account the Russian airliner, which was first bombed. Then you've got the coordinated attack in Paris. Then you've got the attack in Mali, which sent shivers down my spine, because 3 weeks ago we were in Bali, and people kept saying, "Are you going to Mali?" Terrorism is not a new thing. There were terrorists during Jesus' time. Let me take you back a little bit to when Jesus Christ lived. Jesus Christ lived, of course, was born approximately 4 BCE, before Common Era, lived to approximately 30 Common Era. He lived in Jerusalem. During that time, Jerusalem was an occupied territory, occupied by Rome. Let me ask you a question. If you're an occupied territory, are you typically pleased about the situation?
No.
Think apartheid. Now, the difference is the way the Romans handled their business. The Romans put in a puppet government whenever they went in. Does any of this sound vaguely familiar? But all they were interested in was two things. Number one, get the taxes, and that was number one. And number two, keep the peace. Get the taxes, keep the peace. Now, the Israelites, who we also think of as the Jews, the people who gave us the Old Testament, whom Jesus Christ himself was one, were the oppressed people in this situation. There were armed soldiers on every street corner all the time because they were there to what? Keep the peace. There were no police officers. They were there to keep the peace. There was a group of people who wished to return Jerusalem to home rule, and they were called the Zealots. The Zealots, by the way, does anybody know of a famous zealot from the Bible? Simon, one of Jesus' disciples, was a zealot. Zealot is a fancy name for terrorist. Simon, one of Jesus' disciples, was a terrorist. Now, before you think that's terrible, it gets even worse. Matthew was a tax collector, for crying out loud. Ha ha, that was supposed to be funny. What the Zealots would do was they would sneak in during the middle of the night when the Roman soldiers were guarding the city. They would come up behind them, they would grab their heads, they would slit their throats, and they would fall to the ground. Now, did the Zealots really believe that they were going to kill every Roman soldier one by one until they ultimately won and drove Rome out simply by killing everybody? Yes or no? No. What were they trying to do? Terrorize. They were trying to destroy the peace. They were trying to terrorize the other Roman soldiers. They were trying to instill what? Fear. Terror. Because it works. Because it works. ISIS has said in documents they have published that they will take credit for any attack made in the name of Islam anywhere in the world. Did you hear what I just said? So ISIS says they're doing everything, and maybe they are. Again, this is just my opinion from what I've read. But you have a lot of attacks going on around the world, and ISIS has said they will take credit for each and every one of them. You see, what the Zealots were trying to do was not really just upset the Romans, because they knew what would happen when they upset a Roman. In ancient Rome, if you were a Roman and anyone of any other nationality harmed you in any way, a garrison of troops would take off, find that person, and kill them. That's how strongly it meant to be a Roman. When they lashed out, when they killed these Roman soldiers, they weren't just trying to terrorize their soldiers. They were trying to make damn sure there was a backlash against the other people, so they would get in the game. Not much has changed in 2,000 years, friends. But Jesus, when he was putting together his disciples, invited a zealot in. It's kind of interesting. I did a post right after the Paris attacks, and I talked about the importance of justice. I put this on Facebook, but I also talked about the importance of justice without vengeance in mind. That we must first forgive. Forgiveness means we release our resentment. It doesn't mean we lay down our guard and let things happen. It means we don't turn around and ramp it up, which is exactly what terrorists want us to do, is to ramp it up. And what's interesting is I posted this on Facebook. I have almost 40,000 followers. I got lots of comments, 32, which is a pretty high number for a single post. And what I was struck with was the people who claimed to be the most religious in their counterposts or in their comments to my post wanted us to just go and bomb the hell out of them. Thank you, Paris. Send them back into the Stone Age. Send who back into the Stone Age? Let us remember that Steve Jobs is the child of Syrian immigrants. It's so funny, too, as I was reading these comments, because these people were citing Jesus Christ, which is, okay, the Prince of Peace, but then they wanted to bomb him back into the Stone Age. And I thought, wasn't it Jesus Christ who said, turn the other cheek? By the way, do you know what that literally meant in Jesus' time? It doesn't mean what we think it means. Jesus' parables all had rich, deep meanings. We think we know what they mean, but they don't. In most countries around the world, you would never touch somebody with one of your two hands. Anybody know which one it is? Say it. I hear it. The left. It is the unclean hand because you clean yourself with it. In most countries, you're taught to clean yourself with your left hand, if you know what I mean by clean yourself. And the right hand, you would touch someone or serve food or something like that. If you were to strike an underling, you would strike that underling, not with your unclean hand, but you would strike them with the back of your hand. We all see this in movies, right? The bad guy strikes the underling right there, right? When Jesus says turn the other cheek, what he means is he's putting it off on that other person to either strike them with the unclean hand, which would be a sin, or to turn around and strike them as an equal. And to admit that I'm equal to you. Eckhart Tolle said something hatefully brilliant. Because it's brilliant and I hated it when I heard it. He said, no matter who it is, if you were raised exactly like they were in the same situation, you would be just like them. We are equal to everybody in the world, including the crazies who are hating and hurting. And every time we look askance at a Muslim, every time. You know, it's amazing. I was thinking about this morning. On the news, because I have actually watched it a little bit with all this going on, I keep hearing the words Muslim terrorists, Muslim terrorists, Muslim terrorists. You know, nowadays you would never say the black suspect, would you? No, you'd say the suspect, the man, the woman. This is nothing to do with Islam, what is going on, any more than what the KKK is doing has to do with Christianity. And what does all this have to do with gratitude? The greatest gift we can give those who have lost their lives is to be grateful for ours. Don't you think they would have given anything and everything for one more tomorrow? Even with all its struggles, even with all its promises, even with all of its pain. And you were given that gift. It's a joyous gift if we infuse it with joy. And the way we do that is through being grateful. Just being grateful. Sometimes when I go and speak, people look at my bracelet and they say, what is that? And most of y'all probably remember the story. I had this made in China. It's a mala. It's made of jade and pearls. But I tell people honestly, this is my gratitude bracelet. And every morning when I walk my dog, I go through 108 things that I'm grateful for since I last walked my dog. If you come up with 108 things a day that you're grateful for since yesterday, it'll have a huge impact on you. Gratitude is a habit. It's a way of life. And as Meister Eckhart said in the 12th century, if the only prayer you ever uttered was thank you, God, that would be enough. So let us say a prayer of healing and gratitude. Let's all join hands. I'm going to slide up so I can do that too. Paris, can I join your hand? Dear God, in times like this, sometimes it helps us to remember there have always been times like this. And now that they affect us, perhaps we can be the change. We can be open to forgiveness. We can be open to transformation. We can be open to a new way of being. And it starts within our own hearts. Forgiveness and gratitude. Thank you, God. And so it is. Amen.